true. We all can make a difference. The media is all available to us. And every time that we don't speak up and we don't get involved, it's one for the jihadis and one less for free speech. Our next speaker, Robert Spencer, hardly needs an introduction. He is a very accomplished writer, blogger, and student of Islam. He founded and is the director of Jihad Watch. He's affiliated with the David Horowitz Freedom Center. We're very proud to say. And he's the author of 10 books, including the New York Times bestseller, The Truth About Muhammad, and The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam and the Crusades, both Red January publications. His latest book he co-authored with Pamela. Robert has also written 11 monographs and well over 300 articles about jihad and Islamic terrorism. In addition, Robert has been featured on numerous TV shows. He's really an expert in Islam. He knows the facts. He's not making this stuff up. He's a student of it. People would like to pretend that they know more than Islam about it, but very few people do. His books are filled with facts. They're not myths. He dispels the myths. As many of you know, the Quran is a very complex document that if you want to study it, you just can't pick up an average Quran and read it and take it at its face value. There's a lot of nuances to it. I think that one thing on Robert's bio that stood out for me the most was under his frequently asked questions. One of the questions on his website, it says, "Why should I believe what you say about Islam?" And Robert Spencer says, "Pick up any of my books and you will see they are made up largely of quotations from Islamic jihadists and the traditional Islamic sources to which they appeal to justify violence and terrorism. My work sheds light on what these sources say. The evidence stands by itself. Readers can evaluate it for themselves. I would, of course, be happy to debate any scholar about Islam and jihad. This is a standing invitation." Ladies and gentlemen, very few people have the knowledge, the intellect, and the courage to stand up and debate Islamic scholars about Islam. I give you Robert Spencer.
Thank you very much, Craig, for that very generous introduction, and it brings to mind an interesting point, and that is that I don't actually have any plans to debate any Islamic scholars at any time in the future. I have issued invitations to many of them to debate me over the years, and most of them refuse, which I think is indicative in itself of how strong they know their position to be in reality. But I am actually debating later this month a Catholic scholar who has written a book. His name is Peter Kreeft, and he's actually an old professor of mine, and he's written a new book called Between Allah and Jesus. And the book is all about how wonderful Islam is and how much Christians need to learn from Muslims. And so it's, I think, just rather indicative of the fix we're in, and indicative of the general cultural climate that Pamela was describing so vividly in regard to the Ground Zero Mosque, that it really is seen to be a matter of generosity, tolerance, broad-mindedness to, in effect, enable the most repressive ideology on earth. And to run interference for it and make excuses for it is considered to be tolerant and broad-minded, whereas standing for freedom is considered to be racist and bigoted. And that's just the upside-down world that we live in. And of course, chief on the upside-down front is the President of the United States. I was talking to a friend very recently, a Jewish man who was pointing out that Obama had said a few years back in that interview with George Stephanopoulos, he had referred to my Muslim faith. And I said, "Oh, come on, that was just a slip of the tongue." And he said, "Well, listen, consider this. I would never make a slip of the tongue to refer to my Christian faith or my Buddhist faith. I'm Jewish and I'm proud of being Jewish and that's what I am, and I would never make that kind of mistake." And I thought that there was a lot of truth to that there really is something very strange in regard to Barack Obama's connections to Islam, And this is something that Pamela Geller was on way before anybody else. Back in 2007, I'm actually kind of embarrassed to say, I made a video, which you can still find online, but don't bother, taking up the rumors about Obama's Muslim faith. And I said, that's a lot of hooey. And as a matter of fact, that's the screenshot of it with me standing by a sign that says, that's a lot of hooey. And actually, interestingly enough, talking about media bias here again, just as an aside, the Washington Post actually picked up on that and completely turned it around 360 degrees and said I was responsible for starting the rumors that Obama was secretly a Muslim. Which was really sort of absurd because I was trying to debunk them. Or to bunk them, as Reza Aslan would say. But in any case, the parallel track at the same time, in early 2007, and going on through 2008 and up to the election, was at Atlas Shrugs, where Pamela was uncovering all kinds of information about how Obama was registered as a Muslim in school in Indonesia, and she was the first one with the registration form, and how he, confirmation that he went to Quran class, which was only open to Muslim students in Indonesia at the time that he was there, and various other information which I was discounting. And it wasn't until she asked me to work on this book with her, and I started looking at all this, that she explained to me what it was all about. It really doesn't matter ultimately whether Barack Obama secretly professes the Islamic faith now or not. And ultimately, because he's not being very forthcoming about it, nobody really knows except Barack Obama. But I can tell you this also, his saying that he's a Christian is not to say that he's not a Muslim. Now that may seem confusing, but if you read the Quran and study Islam, you will see that Islam positions itself as the true and pure form of both Judaism and Christianity. And so a Muslim has no trouble saying, I'm a Jew and I'm a Christian. We saw Imam Rauf say, I'm a Jew, I've always been a Jew, and everybody said, oh, he's so tolerant and multicultural and modern. Actually, he was just being a pious and Orthodox Muslim. But in any case, whether Obama actually professes the Islamic faith or not is irrelevant. What is relevant is how it has formed his perceptions of the world, his attitudes, and his values. And he did, as Pamela documented, grow up in an Islamic milieu with Muslim parents, and he has clearly, as his policies have indicated over the last 2 years, clearly imbibed the worldview of the Islamic world to the extent that he demonizes Israel, which is the fundamental bogey for the Islamic world, because its very existence is an attack on Islam. You know that in the Quran, the worst enemies of the Muslims are the Jews. And it is said very clearly in the Quran that they will be persecuted and debased and under the curse of Allah forever for not accepting Muhammad as a prophet. And so the idea of a thriving Jewish state that is on land that once belonged to the House of Islam and thus also by Islamic theology belongs to the House of Islam forever, the idea that that state would exist is an attack on Islam and an insult to Islam because it contradicts Quranic imperatives. And so then you see how Barack Obama treats Benjamin Netanyahu and how he's trying to strong-arm the Jewish state into accepting a Palestinian state, which everybody with an ounce of sense will know will become yet another base for jihad attacks against Israel. And you see how he is absolutely, on the other hand, supine in the face of the nuclear threat from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And he doesn't seem to think that's any problem at all. He's much more upset about Jews building homes in Israel than he is about mullahs building bombs in Iran. Why? Well, it all goes back to these core attitudes that he has imbibed from the beginning. And this is why also, of course, it was inevitable that he was going to come out in favor of the Ground Zero Mosque. There just wasn't any other option open to him. There wasn't any doubt about it whatsoever. What was only surprising, perhaps, was that he took so long to do it. But maybe he was waiting for that wonderful iftar dinner so that he could drive the point home about how important it is for us to be supportive and open and welcoming toward Islam. And so consider this. Take this for a second. What if Rauf really is everything that he says he is? What if he is a moderate and peaceful and tolerant individual who really wants to build a mosque of peace and reconciliation and harmony? What if he is? Okay, let's say he is for a minute. Forget his sinister expression. Consider that the Imam Rauf, and no other Imam in the world either, he can't control the discourse in the Islamic world. He cannot control how that mosque will be perceived among Muslims. Because, after all, there are over 1 billion Muslims. Often the numbers are wildly inflated, but there probably are around 1 billion. And not all of them have heard of the Imam Rauf. Not all of them are ever going to hear of him. Not all of them are going to receive his communiques and fall into line. So how are they going to understand the triumphal mosque? Well, I submit to you, they will understand it based on what they see in their own environment, what they see in their own city, in their own countries. And what do they see? Let's tally up. How many mosques are built on the sites of destroyed churches, synagogues, and Hindu temples? Thousands. Literally thousands upon thousands. There's actually a book, a very large, I believe it's a 2-volume book by the great Hindu historian Sitaram Goel, that is just a list of all the Hindu temples that were destroyed and mosques built over them, or converted from being Hindu temples into mosques. And you go into the Middle East, you go into North Africa, you find thousands, same thing, of churches and synagogues destroyed or converted into mosques. You know, the Pope, a few years back, you may remember, went to Syria and he prayed at the tomb of John the Baptist, which is in the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. Why is the tomb of John the Baptist, who's a Christian saint, in a mosque? Well, because it used to be the Cathedral of John the Baptist. Anyway, thousands upon thousands of these places built as triumphal mosques on these sites that were the cherished sites, as Pamela said, of conquered people. How many mosques of peace, harmony, and reconciliation are there in the Islamic world that are built on the site of an earlier Islamic jihad attack in order to build bridges with the people who were attacked? None. Zero. Never happened. Never happened in 1400 years of Islamic history. So, you're Joe Muslim, Yusuf Islam, Cat Stevens. You are in Damascus or Cairo or Islamabad or Jakarta or Dar es Salaam or wherever, and there's the mosque, and everybody knows it used to be a church, or everybody knows there used to be a church here, Christians here, and now there's this Mosque of Triumph. And you hear about the mosque in New York at Ground Zero, and not near Ground Zero, the landing gear from one of those planes crashed right into that building and fell 5 stories to the basement. That's why they want that building. Make no mistake, that building is part of the attack site. And you hear about this mosque being built there on the attack site, what are you going to think it is? It's a foregone conclusion. It doesn't matter if the Imam Rauf is Captain Kangaroo. There is no way he's going to be able to put that narrative across. And of course, he doesn't really want to. He knows that it will be a triumphal mosque. As a matter of fact, the very name Cordoba indicates that. But you see, a lot of you are nodding and you know what Cordoba really means, but think about that it was chosen because he wanted both connotations to apply. He knew, maybe some of you have read or some of you have heard of the book The Ornament of the World by Maria Rosa Menocal. And it is the foremost whitewash of Islamic Spain. She really is responsible. Professor Menocal, yes, I'm calling you out, Professor. Let's have a debate. She is responsible for putting forward this myth that Islamic Spain was a proto-multiculturalist paradise where Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together in peace and harmony and everybody was happy and the lion lay down with the lamb and everything. It was great, except it's fictional. And as a matter of fact, she is honest enough to put, it's only on one page, near the beginning of the book, well, yes, Jews and Christians did not enjoy equality of rights in the Islamic states in Spain, but they were second-class dhimmis. They were deprived of essential rights under the teachings of Islamic law. She does grant you that. But the reality is, see, that this myth has become very popular in the United States today. And you ask the average person, they'll say, oh yes, well, you know, we do have a little bit of a problem with the people who have twisted and hijacked the religion of peace today. But we all know Muslim Spain was so great and wonderful. Except it wasn't. But the fact that people think it was is why he chose the name. So would think, oh, isn't that lovely? We're going to have a new Cordoba in Lower Manhattan. And Jews and Christians and Muslims will dance together and sing together and swim together and play together, and it'll be great. And then he knows that outside the United States, in Jakarta and Islamabad and Cairo and Damascus and Dar es Salaam and Nairobi and all the rest of them, they will say, oh, Cordoba, oh, this is a beachhead for the Islamic invasion and conquest of the United States. Of course, because they know what happened in Muslim Spain. Historical memories are much longer in the Islamic world than they are in the West. And they don't read Maria Rosa Menelcado. So, does Barack Obama know this? Does he care? Of course Barack Obama is aware of all these things. How could he not, when he grew up in Indonesia, when he grew up in an Islamic context, have imbibed these things and understand these things? So what is he really all about? What is really his ultimate plan? It is something that, unfortunately, I cannot give you the answer to in full. I wish I could. But I do think that it is extraordinarily disquieting and something that we should all be aware of, that he is already doing the bidding of the Organization of the Islamic Conference. The Organization of the Islamic Conference is 56 states, plus the Palestinian Authority. It is the largest voting bloc at the United Nations today. The United Nations essentially does the bidding of the OIC, unless it is stopped by the veto from the United States or some other power. And the Organization of the Islamic Conference has been working on, for the last few years, a concerted initiative to limit the freedom of speech in the West. Now why? Craig said that dissent is essential to the freedom of speech. And not only is that true, but also freedom of speech is designed to protect dissent. That's the whole point of it. That instead of having a tyrant in the government who can do and say whatever he wants and get away with whatever he wants with no dissent, the dissenters are protected by the freedom of speech, so that the tyrant can't get away with what he wants to get away with. But he always has to deal with a loyal opposition. And so freedom of speech is a fundamental bulwark against tyranny. In this case, it's the tyranny of Islamic supremacism. The Organization of the Islamic Conference wants to destroy the freedom of speech in the West because they've noticed that there are a few people who are connecting the dots and saying, wait a minute, there's something about Islam that's causing violence and a cultural supremacism that is asserting the principle that wherever Islamic law and Western laws can contradict each other, it is Western laws that have to give way. And the Organization of the Islamic Conference does not like us to talk about this because then people wake up. People hear about it, they understand what's going on, and then they will, like many of you here, stand up and start taking action. And they don't want that. So they want to make it illegal, impossible for us to speak about these elements of Islam under the guise of criminalizing what they call religious hatred. Now, nobody really is in favor of hatred, not even me. Nobody really likes hate speech, but what is hate speech? Hate is in the eye of the beholder. If I say Islam is not a religion of peace, and Islam, the Quran, counsels warfare against and the subjugation of unbelievers under a global Islamic state, those are statements of fact, but they would be hate speech in many, many contexts, including ABC News. And so, if that's hate speech, and it's impossible for us to say, then we are rendered mute and defenseless in the face of the advancing jihad threat. And Barack Obama actually co-sponsored, the United States co-sponsored with Egypt in the summer of 2009, a resolution calling upon UN member states to criminalize religious hatred. And so for the first time, the United States government went on record opposing the United States Constitution at the UN. And you notice it didn't get a whole lot of coverage. But the ultimate effect, the ultimate goal of the Obama administration is extraordinarily disquieting. And there's so many enemies of the freedom of speech that he has in his administration, so many different people, different officials, and they're all profiled in the book, who have come out against the freedom of speech, come out in favor of restrictions of the freedom of speech. He's got them all over his administration, and they're working. So this is the time to stand up. We have to, as Pamela said, beat them in November, and beat them again in 2012, or really, the situation could be more dire than we could imagine. And I'm sorry to leave you on that note, but this is not just a call to pessimism or a call to gloom, it is a call to action. And if we value the greatest civilization on earth and the greatest country on earth, then this is the time to stand up and defend it, or all will be lost. Thank you.